We're here for the purposes of hearing HB 2346 and with a description on what the bill does. Reviser Reimer, you're welcome to stay there or get up if you like. Stretch out.
Stretch today. Nice.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2346 establishes the Kansas Sports Tourism Grant Program to be administered by the Secretary of Commerce. The purpose of this program is to assist communities to develop and continue as a venue for sporting events. The bill also establishes a committee, the Kansas Sports Tourism Grant Committee, that reviews applications from communities for grants, determines the awards, and oversees the program in cooperation with the Secretary of Commerce. The Secretary is directed to award grants approved by the committee. If you turn to Section 2 of the bill, you'll see a description of the committee. Committee members are the chairpersons of the House and Senate Commerce Committees, one appointee each for the Governor, President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, Minority Leader of the Senate, and Minority Leader of the House. The chairperson of the House Commerce Committee serves as the chairperson in odd number years, and the chairperson of the Senate Commerce Committee serves in even-numbered years. There are a number of other provisions governing the committee that's also discussed in Section 2 that includes an exception from the Open Meetings Act at the discretion of the chairperson when discussing grant applications, and you can see that on page 2. The committee is required to allocate 60% of the funds available for grants each year, and we'll discuss where that money comes from toward the end. That's at the end of the bill. For grants each year to sporting events, that the committee determines will generate at least $2.5 million in economic impact and 3,000 consumed hotel room nights. The committee is to allocate 40% of the funds to events that generate at least $250,000 in economic impact or a minimum of 500 consumed hotel room nights. At least 30% of that latter allocation must be provided for grant applicants or set aside for grant applicants for projects in counties other than Johnson, Wyandotte, and Sedgwick. The committee is prohibited from awarding grants to projects involving listed major national sports organizations or established residential professional sports entities, Kansas residential professional sports entities. The bill sets out guidance and criteria to be applied by the committee in considering grant applications. General considerations set forth in the bill include an intent to ease the financial burden on sports destinations when bidding on and hosting sports events and incentivizing event owners to bring events that are economically beneficial. The committee is not to award grants simply to meet operational expenses for annual events unless there's a chance that the event may be lost due to a lack of financial support if there's a competitive bidding for that event. Section 3 discusses the application process. Applications are submitted to the Secretary of Commerce. The Secretary of Commerce is also the person that communicates with applicants through the process. Or the Secretary's designee, of course. The Secretary provides the applications to the committee and assists the committee in considering economic impact requirements that are required by the bill, including utilization of a specific program, the Destinations International Event Impact Calculator, a software program. If the committee awards a grant, the Secretary disperses the grant funds from the Kansas Sports Tourism Program Grant Fund. That's established in Section 5. Section 3 also provides criteria to be applied to applications by the committee. Those criteria include that events must be held in Kansas. Applicants must explain how grant funding would develop sports tourism in their community, region, or the state. Applicants must obtain grant sponsorship, and if the applicant is a event owner, the sports commission, and direct marketing organization in the community hosting the event is required to be a grant sponsor and must demonstrate tax-exempt status. Section 3 further requires that grant funds be used for specific expenses that are identified in the application and that are approved by the committee. And those expenses are listed on page 4 of the bill. They include promotions and marketing, funds for a bid effort, site fees, fees for use of rights, rental of equipment or flooring necessary for the event, among other expenses that are listed there on page 4. Certain expenses are also excluded, and they are also listed on page 4. These include facility building, renovation, remodeling, expenses for a facility, debts incurred prior to receipt of the grant, hospitality or social functions for events outside the sports event venue that include alcohol, and there are also other expenses that may not be used with the grant funds that are listed on page 4. The maximum grant award is limited to $100,000 per event for one of those major sporting events described earlier, with a criteria of $2.5 million in economic impact and a minimum of 3,000 consumed hotel room nights in the local or regional Kansas market. The maximum grant award for the smaller category of project is $50,000 per event. And those are for sporting events that, as noted, will generate at least $250,000 in economic impact or a minimum of 500 hotel room nights consumed. Section 4 requires that as a condition of receiving a grant, an applicant must provide a post-event report to the Secretary of Commerce. This report includes several components. One is an economic impact report with certain listed information that must be provided on page 5 of the bill. This report includes an economic impact report produced by, again, that specific program, Destinations International Event Impact Calculator, with assistance, if necessary, by the Secretary or a grant sponsor. The report also must contain an accounting of expenses incurred by the categories, by specific categories specified on page 5, and proof of payment of the expenses at least equal to the amount of the grant. A written explanation of the event, outcomes, comparison with projected outcomes, community impact of the event, and future event plans is also required. Section 5 of the bill establishes the fund, which provides the money for these grants, the Kansas Sports Tourism Program Grant Fund, and this section also directs a transfer of $3,575,000 from the State Economic Development Initiatives Fund to the new fund each July 1, starting July 1st, 2025. The aggregate amount of grants to be awarded each fiscal year is limited to that same amount, $3,575,000. If enacted, this bill would become effective July 1st, 2025.
All right, Charles, well, thanks for the explanation. And committee, before we start with questions, I have put there's a requested amendment to this bill. Of course, we had to go through the bill as it sits as the explainer, but there is a requested amendment in the S drive that I put there, and one of the things it does, so if you have questions regarding around the commission that's formed, it changes the commission and slides it over just to the Department of Commerce to make up the decision. And it also redoes kind of how the grants are calculated or would be calculated. And so with that, I'll open for questions on the underlying bill. Any questions for the reviser? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to look through the bill and identify where is there a definition for the Kansas Sport Tourism applicant. Who can apply?
Reviser Reimer.
So I don't think there's a specific definition that's set out, but there is language that provides generally that it's the possibly the event owner, and then also there's a requirement that there be a sponsor, and that is I think generally a private entity that is involved in marketing or involved in promoting the program.
Does it require it to be a private entity?
I don't think there's a specific requirement that it be private, no.
Okay, so the way that it's drafted currently, World Cup could qualify, or a sports team at a community college, or an NCA, AA, a high school that has a big tournament. As it is written, they
No.
could actually be, apply for this grant?
No, actually, there is a limitation on the award of grants. You can't award grants for, national sports organizations like the, NBA or something like that. And I suppose World Cup would possibly fall into that category. I think the bill is aimed more toward, maybe high school level or that kind of program.
Sure, but it doesn't require that. So a school district could apply.
I think under the language of the bill, possibly, yeah. I might defer that to the grant, to the proponents, but I'll have to look through it again, but I don't know that there's anything that would specifically prohibit that.
Okay, and my next question is related to measuring success, measuring the number of rooms, measuring the economic impact. If you have more than one event in one region, how are we going to know that one event met the goals and it wasn't the accumulation of two events? Or how are we going to distinguish that? If there's 3,000 rooms, how do we know that it's attributable to this event?
So the bill provides that the Secretary of Commerce is to assist the applicant in determining the economic impact. So
it's up to the secretary.
There isn't any specific, procedure for how that's done, but it does provide for that specific program, which I mentioned, and also the assistance of the secretary in general to figure out the economic impact.
And I believe, and you may be able to help us identify, it does require a certain percentage to be from out of state, or no?
No, there's no specific requirement for out-of-state visitors.
Okay. And I think, Mr. Chair, I'm going to leave it with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. On the bill, if they have an event, is the money paid up front or after the event's over to see how much they would be receiving?
No, the grant is provided prior to, and the intent is to assist with the expenses of the event, and then there's a report afterward, an accounting of the expenses.
And if the event doesn't reach its goal, is there a clawback they give it back?
There's no clawback provision in the bill. There is, there are specific requirements for the expenses, and those are listed out, what is to be allowed. But I don't believe there's a specific clawback provision.
Okay, so the grant is, the entire grant is awarded up front, or it's after the fact? Or it looks like the conferees are going to be able to answer that question, Charles, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
They can speak to the intent anyway.
So, my understanding is that this would be sort of similar to a standard grant program. I mean, there is a lot of oversight as far as what expenses are permitted and allowed. But, for example, on pages 2 and 3, there's the committee shall determine and approve the amount of grant and use of the grant funds for expenses listed in the grant application. There is that oversight.
Okay, any further questions for Charles? All right, Revisor Rummer, thank you very much.
And I'll just note one other thing with respect to awarding the money. If you look at page 3, there's basically the committee makes a decision to award the grant, and then the secretary authorizes and disperses the funds as awarded by the committee to the successful applicant.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Okay, so we'll, looks like first on the list is Beth Ansel for proponent. We'll open the proponent section. Beth Ansel, Visit Shawnee. Welcome to committee and thanks for being here today.
Thank you. I'm here to express my strong support for House Bill 2346. Sports tourism is a growing economic impact for communities like Shawnee across the state. We don't have large tourism activities, but sports tourism is huge for our community. We fully support the bill as it's written with 3 key adjustments. We want to make sure there's an established, transparent measure to track economic impact. We want to prioritize the host community's hotel stays, giving preference to lodging within the host city that will maximize the direct local economic impacts. We also want to make sure that this bill makes eligible existing tournaments that return year after year. Their retention is important because they keep bringing the year after year growth. Kansas is losing sports tourism dollars to states with similar incentive programs, and this bill allows us to be more competitive with these states and draw out-of-state visitors to increase our tourism-generated revenue.
Okay, Beth, thank you. Any questions for Beth? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Beth, what have we lost? Can you quantify that and tell me specifically?
What have we lost?
You said that we're losing opportunities to other states. So can you tell us which opportunities we've lost?
Other states make available funding to draw in tourism. Currently, we don't really have that. Shawnee doesn't have a budget to do that. So if the state had a budget to allow us to draw in these large tournaments, that would bring huge amounts of people to the state of Kansas, not just to my community.
But you can't cite a specific example of anything that we've lost because they chose to go somewhere else.
Well, we would lose the tournaments that choose to go to communities like Sandusky, Ohio, or to Florida to their events, or maybe down to Texas. We would lose those tournaments and their hotel stays.
Representative, I think she's just speaking in general terms. Yeah. Your second requirement or suggested change is priority for host community hotel nights. How do you propose to do that? Currently, we're running into some issues with one of the largest tournaments in Overland Park running into they're not a lack of hotel rooms because they're being reserved for the World Cup event that's a few weeks later. And so how do you force a business to keep hotel room nights available for an event if they already, rather than releasing them to someone else? How does a city do that?
We can't force them. I've gone to our hotels and relayed to them the importance of these tournaments because we know they're going to come back year after year. So when World Cup is here, if we displace those tournaments, we're going to lose the future business.
No, I agree with you on that. So, okay, any further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Next up, from Visit Overland Park, Warren Wilkerson. Welcome to committee, sir.
I have a presentation, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Tarwater and committee. Appreciate the opportunity to come and speak today about House Bill 2346 and sports tourism. My name is Warren Wilkinson. I'm the president and CEO of Visit Overland Park. We are the official destination marketing organization for the city of Overland Park. Sports tourism is one of our largest strategies in Overland Park, but it is big business in the United States. to the tune of $52 billion annually. It generates significant tax revenues across the country at approximately $20 billion annually. Kansas currently is in a uncompetitive position because we do not have a sports tourism grant program. We have 23 states in the United States today that have programs like what we're suggesting. Another 2 will come online in 26. These are programs that help communities like Overland Park and all across Kansas attract and retain economically impactful sporting events. When we bring in a competition that brings in large amounts of out-of-state teams, we work with a rights holder, a person that puts on the tournament. They have expenses, and the rights fees that destinations like Overland Park pay could be supported with this program. I have a couple slides that I'd like to take you through, if you could advance, or unless there's a way. A sports tourism traveler spends, on average, based on Sports ETA's analysis, approximately $360 per person every time they come and attend or participate in a sporting event in the United States. A day visitor spends about $80. It's one of the reasons why the language in the bill talks about hotel room nights. We're trying to get overnight visitation because overnight visitation drives a lot more economic impact and will drive a lot more tax revenue for the state of Kansas. In Kansas, we have 26 destination marketing organizations, 11 of which put together the impact of sports tourism in the state. And those 11 reported $318 million in economic impact from the sporting events that they hosted in 2023. You can advance that. We are surrounded by states that have sports tourism funding models. 2 more coming online. California is going to be coming online here shortly, and that's going to be a significant juggernaut just because of sheer population, sheer land mass, and the amount of dollars they're going to be able to generate to support a sports tourism strategy. By developing a sports tourism fund, it allows communities in Kansas to be competitive with other communities. When we go out and try and attract significant economically impactful sporting events to Overland Park, or any community tries to do this, we are competing with other destinations across the United States. When the pandemic happened in 2020, the first portion of travel business that came back online was sports tourism. And since that time, it has grown well beyond the 2019 revenue figures that we experienced. It is the tip of the spear for Overland Park and a lot of the communities in Kansas. We have the facilities to be competitive. We need this kind of program to compete with other communities in other states that have these programs. Think of communities like Frisco, Texas, or Hamilton County, Indiana, or across the border, just to the east. Missouri has a $3 million sports fund. In the end of this year, that number will go to $6 million annually. And we compete with them regularly for sporting events. That differentiation of having sports tourism funds allows us to be competitive and allows us to leverage the infrastructure that we have built in Kansas to host meaningful, economically meaningful events. It drives tax revenue for the state and our communities and lower the tax burden for our residents. You can go ahead, keep on going. We've talked about this. Go ahead. So the reviser shared that the number is 3,575,000. We've had really impactful meetings over the last several weeks with several legislators, and we've developed amended language that streamlines and simplifies the grant program and also provides an economic impact and a return on investment rigor for the state. Go ahead. Go ahead, one more. Thank you very much. So this is suggested amended language to House Bill 2346. First of all, providing the Secretary of Commerce some flexibility in how they grant the funds. So instead of a committee, it would be the Secretary of Commerce or a designee And it would give them some flexibilities in the event an event falls between the two different parameters in grant funding levels. The Secretary of Commerce or his designee would be able to have some flexibility in granting dollars. I think it's really important to note also that this grant would be post-event, not pre-event. A rights holder would work with a destination marketing organization like Visit Overland Park or Visit Shawnee or Visit Kansas City, Kansas, or all the others across the state of Kansas and develop a proposed economic impact calculation for the event they're trying to bring to their community. The actual letting of funds would be on a post-event calculation. So the state would have already received their tax revenue before they let funds within 90 days of event completion. So there's the risk of the state not getting their revenues is completely eliminated with that change. It would be a post-event distribution of funds. I think the last thing that I'd like to say about as far as the details of some of the amendments, one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that this money would get dispersed across the state. So every community in Kansas would be able to avail themselves of this $3.5 million if it was approved. But we carved $500,000, a minimum of $500,000 out from the three largest counties in the state as it relates to sports tourism in Sedgwick, Johnson, and Wyandotte. So make sure that smaller communities have access to these dollars. They have access to the total amount, but we carved out at a minimum of $500,000 that would only be used for areas of the state beyond those three counties that I just mentioned. Go ahead. This is this chart gives you a little bit of visibility of the rigor that goes into what an event would have to generate an economic impact and what the return on investment would be. Just to, to give you an overview, based on the return on investment that's been calculated in this pro forma, and the structure that we put this together, the average return on investment would be 324%. So if you were to let $3.5 million, it would generate over $14 million in tax revenue for the state of Kansas, which is a pretty good return on investment for the state. And that is direct economic impact, not induced. And there's a lot of opportunity for induced spend as well. But we really believe that Kansas can be competitive in this space, but we are in quite frankly, an arms race across the country in facility development. We don't need to build facilities. We have great facilities in Kansas, but we are in a situation right now where other states and other communities have these kind of resources to be more competitive than us when we are working with rights owners to bring events to Kansas. Go ahead. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I want to go back to that previous slide, if you don't mind, Tanner. For those of you that have a copy of the updated draft that you pulled out of the S drive, there's more levels than this. It's fairly complicated, and it's unusual, I know, to have a rewrite of a bill before you hear the bill. But I guess they did enough research and talked to enough members that they felt like they needed to make some changes. Warren, I am a huge fan of tournament sports, and I've witnessed it. I went to, I think you guys brought in a pickleball tournament, and I went to visit that, and it was, you couldn't find parking for blocks. People were parking in fields and paying to park in fields. So can you explain kind of what that was and what the economic impact was and how many players came in from it? It was a professional pickleball tournament.
We were, I'm joined by my Vice President of Sports Tourism, Eric Olson, and Chad McFarland behind me. We worked with PPA, which is the Professional Pickleball Association, to bring a pickleball tournament to Overland Park. They were thinking of putting it in Kansas City, and we, in a very competitive way, moved it from Kansas City, Missouri over to Kansas. and hosted it at Elite Tennis. It had over 1,000 competitors from 42 states. We were on TV for 3 days. The impact it had on our hotels, the impact it had on our restaurants and shopping was palpable, a couple $1 million in economic impact. And this was something that we ended up having put money in. Visit Overland Park paid cash to make that event happen, to bring it, move it over. So there were some costs that we bore to make it so that PPA would bring their event to Overland Park. And the impact on our community was significant. Not only was there an economic impact, but there was a sense of pride and a quality of life. They were so excited, our residents were so excited to see that we could host a nationally televised event like the PPA in Overland Park. Having a sports tourism grant would allow us to do that on a much more regular basis. We have limited funds to incent rights holders to bring events to Overland Park, so we have to be very judicious. I'll give you another example, Chairman. We recently hosted USU Soccer. That was a significant, the Midwest Championships. We hosted 223 teams from 13 states, generated almost 8,000 room nights. 3,000 of those rooms ended up being in Overland Park. We worked with multiple communities across Johnson County to host that event, and that collaboration could be seen a lot more often if we had these kind of funds to go attract even more and larger tournaments, so that we're not just doing it just in Overland Park, but beyond our city borders.
Okay, now I want to reference this, and I'll turn it over to the committee here in a minute, but I want to reference this chart. Can you kind of walk us through somebody that would get a $10,000 grant based on this chart? And then tell us how you came up with the state return on investment. Is that actual income tax collected for the state, or is that economic just?
That's actual tax revenue for the state. So we, obviously, if you have an overnight visitor spends more money than a day visitor. We use in partnership with our trade association, Destinations International, the Event Impact Calculator, which was developed by Oxford Economics. It's the same company that does the Kansas State Economic Impact Analysis for the Tourism Department. It is the industry standard in economic impact analysis. And we put the information in on hotel room nights, ADR. The calculator allows you to adjust tax rates. And we put in all the information of the type of tournament it is, and it spits out a economic impact. And in that economic impact, it spits out a sales tax calculation at the city and state levels.
Okay, so on the $10,000, the $32,000 return, that's state.
That is state
That's
revenue.
income tax and our share of the sales tax.
It's sales tax. It is sales tax across 5 or 6 buckets. So restaurant, hotel. So TGT is a city tax, but the sales tax of 6.5 goes to the state, and that's across all the things that a visitor spends. So an average visitor, sports tourism visitor, spends $360 per person.
And when you say per person, that's
Yeah.
mom, dad, the player,
And contestant
brother,
or
sisters.
contestant and brother.
Okay.
And depending on the type of sport, the calculator adjusts the calculation because each sport has a different profile. And that all comes from Sports ETA, which is the governing body of sports commissions across the United States.
Okay, so this chart, $10,000, economic impact of $500,000, and hotel room nights of 1,000, and you will calculate that after the event.
It actually gets calculated twice, but it calculated first to give the rights holder an idea of what the number they could get, and the destination marketing organization that is sponsoring this ask. But the monies are let on a post-event calculation, so you have to show what you produced.
Okay, all right, committee. Any further questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that explanation because transient guest tax is retained locally, and I see that you did not include that in your numbers.
Yeah.
So why come up with the figure of 1/3? I mean, it basically, we're going to give 1/3 of our revenue back, and we don't know, and there's no way to distinguish but for on those hotel rooms, or, you know, we don't know who brings their lunch with them in a big cooler or a, you know, when we would go to club baseball, many families never even leave the ball fields. They're going to bring coolers and they're going to bring it with them. So how do we distinguish that?
Well, when you bring in these larger events, these competitors spend money are staying in our hotels, eating in our restaurants and shopping in our stores, and we feel that compression. And at least for Overland Park, I have access to what the sales tax buckets look like. So when we host a large tournament, we can see significant increases in tax revenues across restaurant, retail, hotel, across the board. So yeah, there are going to be small subsets of tournament attendees that may bring a bag lunch, but generally speaking, the larger proportion of the people are going to be out in our restaurants and eating and shopping in our stores, and most importantly, staying in our hotels, generating economic impact.
Sure, and I understand that restaurants can calculate and they know what their best and busiest weekends are, whether it's Mother's Day or whatever it is, Cinco de Mayo, they know when they're, what's driving that up. So let me ask you a question. What would be preventing our cities such as Overland Park from providing this incentive if they wanted it, they believed that it was valuable? They could create a fund and they could put $1 million in that fund, and then they could share and do this very thing. What would prevent them from doing that? And have you ever made that ask?
So we are currently funded through TGT through a contract with the city. So the city is investing in tourism right now to the tune of over $3 million annually for Visit Overland Park. I think it's important to note that there are 23 states that have the exact very similar programs in place and by Kansas not having this, we are in a competitive disadvantage. And it's just getting more and more as the time goes on. I mean, just look across the border to our east. Missouri's going to go from 3 million to 6 million. Wisconsin just announced their sports tourism fund, and they started at 5 million. Delaware, one of the smallest states in the United States, has a $10 million sports tourism fund because they see the value in this kind of economic impact. And I think it's important to note, and I appreciate the question, is that the investment in the facilities that communities make is part of their investment in this type of opportunity. Shield Soccer Complex, Blue Valley Rec, the facilities that we leverage across Overland Park and beyond are already investments in this. And we're asking the state to help make us competitive.
So there's already $3 million fund that Overland Park does.
Not for sports tourism, for the operation of our organization and all the great work we do. There are lots of other strategies that we deploy at Visit OP. Sports tourism happens to be one of them. And we invest in sports tourism, but our dollars only go so far.
Correct. But Overland Park has already invested this amount of money for sports tourism, for your organization, and they could, if it was valuable and they were reaping the benefits and they were getting the transient guest tax, you add in the transient guest tax and the local sales tax, it's significantly more than what you've placed up here. So in that sense, it could be very much worth their while, and any community could do this, correct?
I would say that generally speaking, across the United States, these funds are generally at the state level, not at the city level. I don't know of a lot. I don't know, and I've been CMO for Chicago and also Indianapolis. I can tell you that it is not at the city level. It's usually at the state level.
Correct. And I think my question was, they could do it.
Yeah, they could do that, and there's a lot of things.
Right, they could do it. And so, and I think that's generally what's happening is rather than try to fund locally the programs that we believe in that are driving economic growth, they're coming to the state where, you know, and spreading it across an entire state. And it's just interesting that you know, we're not going local first, so.
Well, I mean, I would say that, you know, if we were to, based on the bill amended language that we've developed, if the state were to invest $3.5 million, you'd get $14 million in tax revenue in return. That seems to be a pretty good return on investment. I don't know of many programs that return dollars back to the state.
And my last question is simply that we already have a very robust economy around sports in Kansas. We spend millions, if not billions, in terms of fiscal dollars that we, for star bond districts that are related to sports. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do, sir. Yeah. We do. We spend quite a bit of tax dollars to prop up these entities, both local and state. And therefore, this is a robust economy. It will continue to be a robust economy. And it's just, I feel like this is quite a stretch. So I guess I don't really have a question. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Chairman, the question I have for you, if you take the $10,000 line and the 500,000 impact and 1,000 rooms, can you tell me roughly how many actual people would that be for a number of people for an impact?
So it depends on the sport, on what the party size is, and it varies. So girls volleyball travels at a larger party than boys soccer.
That's not my point.
Okay,
just saying,
I'm sorry.
Of the 1,000 rooms, is there a certain number of people you think are coming to your community? How many people would you expecting to come to your event to fill 1,000 rooms?
Well, it would be, in generally speaking, about 1.8 per, at a minimum 1.8 on average
Okay, thank you.
per room. So a dad or a mom and a participant, but it depends, again, as I said, depending on the sport, sometimes some sports travel with larger parties than others. And this is just based on sports ETA data across the nation.
Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Warren, thank you for being here today. I actually kind of like it. I mean, representatives are right. We spend a lot of money propping up a lot of stuff, but I don't know of too many people that have come to that well and talked to us and say, hey, listen, we're looking for a little seed money, but we don't want you to give us anything until we've proven that you've, you know, doubled your money, tripled your money, whatever it is. And I just think it's actually refreshing in today's day and age, seeing not only do we kind of look at the event, kind of figure out what your incentive would be and take a look at the whole aspect of it, but give you an idea. But we don't make a move, we don't pay a penny until that has been proven. And at the end of the day, and I actually like that concept. So all the things we spend money on, I think that's the best way to spend money ever. So anyway, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, and so I also want to make a side note that TGT in Overland Park, the bulk of it goes to pay for their hotel and convention center that they built that competes against these other hotels that pay the tax. And so it's kind of a weird deal, but there's not a whole lot of money left over outside of that, and the little bit of money they give to Visit Overland Park. There's not a whole lot of money there. I believe they just rebuilt that hotel, and the bonds started out 20-some years ago at 80 million, and I think they're up to 120-some million now. But we've got an audit coming in on that in a few weeks to kind of figure out why that bond fund keeps growing and why after 20-some years it's not paid down. So we'll get to the bottom of that, and maybe there will be more money eventually. Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also a sports fan, soccer mom, deluxe forever and ever, and I'm quite familiar with the U.S. Youth Soccer Championship that's at the Shields, Overland Park. So it sounds to me, do you know how many years we've had that? Because I feel like we've had that event as ours for a very long time.
So we hosted it in 19, then we hosted it in 24, and we'll host it again in 25, and then it leaves.
Okay.
So, and it is when we work with US Youth Soccer to bring that to Overland Park, we had to pay a rights fee to US Youth Soccer. That they don't just come to Overland Park without us writing a check. So we raised money, we used our money, and we did get a small grant from the Lieutenant Governor.
Well, and I recently visited Blue Hawk and the opportunity there for bringing these families, and they spend money, I know, because I was one of them. So I would really hate to see us lose these events by not being competitive in this area. Thank you for bringing this bill.
Any further questions for Warren Wilkerson? All right, sir. Thanks so much for coming in. We'll move on.
Appreciate the time.
Eric, did you have anything to add, or are you comfrey today? Nope. Okay. You're the better looking one. I just was going to give you a chance. Jeremy McDowell, Top Gun Events. And Top Gun is one of the largest, if not the largest, softball tournament, maybe even in the world, not just the nation. And they are located in Kansas. And thanks for staying here and sticking it out and not moving to another state yet. So thanks for coming today.
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks to the committee. As the Chairman said, my name is Jeremy McDowell. I own Top Gun Events. We're based out of Lenexa, Kansas, but we run events in 10 states. I run events in Kansas, in Overland Park, Shawnee, KCK, Topeka, and Wichita. I've been in the industry now for 25 years, so I was in the industry before this was an industry, to be really honest with you. Going back to 2001, I started as a volunteer. And so I've been fortunate enough to see sports for what it is, where it started and where it's at now in 2025. I've had the opportunity to sit on many national committees and national boards that have talked about economic impact across the country and what sports tourism does for these states. I was responsible and being part of a large committee that got Space Coast Stadium based out of Vieira, Florida, built, and now a very successful 13-field all-turf. It's the former place where the Washington Nationals played their spring training. With that, with owning Top Gun Events, as Chairman said, we are one of the top 3 elite-level fast-pitch companies in the United States. There's one in Southern California, and there's a large one in Colorado, Triple Crown, which she does have testimony as well. And we work very well with those other 2 large organizations. Our main focus is to take the recruitable athlete that aspires to play at the next level and help those kids get to that place. In 2013, we started an event here in Kansas with an idea that we were going to bring elite level softball talent from across the country to the mid part of the United States. And quite honestly, that was a stretch. Elite level fast pitch was played in California, it was played in Texas, it was played in Georgia, and every one of our athletes that played at the next level or aspired to play at the next level had to get in a plane and fly across this country to get a chance to play at the next level. In 2013, after being in the industry for 12 plus years, we took it up on myself, along with my other business owner at Top Gun Events, to create an invitational called the Top Gun Invite. First year, 84 teams from 14 states. Fast forward now, 10 years, 11 years now. In 2024, we were blessed to host our 11th annual event that was housed in all over KC Metro, majority of that in the state of Kansas, where we saw over 340 teams from 32 states. And 2 years ago, we had the national softball team of New Zealand. Next year, we'll have the national softball team of Australia coming in. We will see over 400 college recruiters here from 40 different states. Every Power 4 major head coach will be here during that week. It is a spectacle to see. So for you that have not had a chance to see it, I would encourage you to come out. That is housed right here in the state of Kansas. Beyond Top Gun Invite, I host over 34 events this past year. We'll host over 40 in 2025. And I attend a lot of large major trade shows. As Warren has spoken to, it is a very, very competitive market. In 2024, the Top Gun Invite received a national award as one of the top 3 amateur sports events in the entire country, recommended by Sports Magazine. Also, the Business Journal World in 2024 put out an article that the Top Gun Invitational was the 7th most largest impact in all of Kansas City Metro, which includes Big 12 tournament and every large convention that Kansas City, Missouri brings in. I only bring this up because the success of this has led to many, many opportunities for myself and our organization. As a resident of Kansas for the past 47 years, a resident that has owned 5 to 6 businesses here in the state of Kansas, I don't want to move this event. I have worked with Johnson County Parks and Rec to see their $50 million renovation that they invested into so that we can keep our facilities where they're at to be able to attract these types of events. As someone that saw in 2012 that every one of our athletes had to get in an airplane to fly to California or fly to Texas, it is my passion to keep this event here. That's what started our tour 7 to 8 months ago when I engaged with the Catalyst team, because I realized that what I felt more than anything, there was a lack of education around sports tourism. And so I took it the last 7 to 8 months to travel the state, meet with many representatives and senators across the state just to explain and to listen what their feedback was. The biggest thing we heard was we support sports tourism. We know sports tourism is a big part of that's the visitation sector, but we will not just give out money. As someone that's a business owner for 5 or 6 previous businesses, we talk a lot about ROI. I have studied these 23 states, best in practice. The advantage of being number 24 or number 25 into this is we've had states for the last 5, 6, 7 years that have paved the way. What we have done by creating this fund and this opportunity is not only to give DMOs like Eric and every DMO across the state of Kansas a tool or a mechanism for them to be competitive with these other states that are out there. It also, with this, the way this is created, it guarantees an ROI to the state post-event, which is something I'm very passionate about, because as an event rights holder, I should not get a handout and then not perform. My job should be to pledge to the city and county what I'm capable of doing, what I think is going to happen. We put something, what we believe that pledge will be, and then post-event through, and I think this question's been asked a few times, how do we prove that that is with your tournament? Everything we do in sports tourism as large events is contractual events. So every one of my hotels is under contract. So with my 330 teams that'll be here in June, 290 of those will be hotel teams. I will know where every team stays and how many rooms they've taken and how many people stay in those rooms. Okay, and that's what that calculator comes up and why it spits out that number. And that's how we're able to do that. If I don't track that and I don't provide that, I'm not eligible for that money, plain and simple. So for me, it's very important that we understand that it is a trackable, measurable. We align ourselves with third-party hotel organizations that help us track all that and place the teams in these properties. With that, I just want to thank you for this time and this opportunity, and I hope that you'll just at least consider passing this through the committee, and I appreciate being heard today. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks a lot for all that information. We've got a question from Representative Clayton.
Sorry, not so much a question, just expressing my appreciation to you for talking about your ROI methods, in particular, the way that you track things with hotel rooms and spending. Thank you for doing that. That's helpful.
Thank you.
So we have another bill that we've been chewing on in here, the Star Bond bill, and tracking visitors from out of town. And, you know, we're going to kind of, when we work that bill, we're going to work on a better way to track visitors to make sure that these Star Bond attractions are really attracting tourism from out of state. And so we will probably, if we work this bill, work some sort of tracking into it. And so if you could get the committee an example of how that works, we could try to figure out a way to do that. I have one question for you before I turn it over to the next questionnaire, and that is, what about rural areas? So this bill starts at a $250,000 economic impact and 500 hotel room nights. What about a smaller tournament that a rural area wants to try to recruit? what do you do for them in
Yeah,
this
and
bill?
once again, this is proposed language. We can definitely look at that at a lesser amount. What we started with was just how do we show an ROI to the state of at least 16,000, right? Which is where that $5,000 grant allocation comes from. But if we wanted to look at this as a $125,000 economic impact, and that grant goes down to 2,500, the ratios are still the same for the state. So there's movement in that. We just started at where we see most of the times across the state, that is just a magic number. So we just followed suit with that, but it could be changed.
Okay, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you did a great job explaining, and thank you for being in Kansas. My question for you is, of the other states, what types of caps are there? We're at 30%. I just kind of Googled, it said Oklahoma's 25. What are the others?
When you say caps,
Sales tax. So you bring in a certain amount of sales tax, and we'll give you back a proportion of it. For what was proposed here, it's between 27 and 30%. What are the other states doing? Looks like Oklahoma will give no more than 25%.
yeah, I mean, I think it varies from state to state. Not all that information is public. Most of the time, based on the events that I run, a lot of times I see even up to 2 to 1. So when we looked at this, we were really looking at trying to look at 3.5 to 4.1 investment back. There are a couple of those categories that are about a 3.27, but we were really looking at about a 4 to 1 ratio back to the state on most of those on that graph. But a lot of times I see anywhere from 2 to 3 times back to me as a rights holders. It just depends by state when you go, and I don't operate in all these 23 states.
Can you at least tell us our neighboring states, Nebraska, Missouri?
Yeah, I mean, Missouri, with them now allocating from 3 to 6 million, and I just left a sports trade show there last week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with Missouri Sports Conference. They are very aggressive, not only with new facilities that are being built and turf that's being put down. They are not blessed with the facilities we have here in the state of Kansas. They have gotten very aggressive, and a lot of times what they're looking at for an event the size of like the TGI, it's usually a flat number because there's a history with the event. For so many years, they're able to allocate an X amount of dollars for a flat rate. In that situation, I don't know what the Missouri state tax is, but if it's 6.5%, in that scenario, what they offered me is going to be about a 3.1 to 1 back to me based on what the state makes.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you do find Nebraska's, I will also be looking for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Sutton. Just checking if you're awake, sir. All right, seeing no more questions. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you.
All right, we have virtual, Katrina Margot. No? Technical difficulties. Sorry, Katrina. She has submitted testimony, so we can read it. You also have 10 other proponent written only, and we have 2 neutral written only. Is there anyone else here to testify as a proponent for this bill in person? Seeing none, any neutral that want to speak in person? Come on up, sir, and introduce yourself. And did you submit testimony? We just misread it?
Yes, we did.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Alan Carr. I'm the Executive Director at Visit Kansas City, Kansas, but I'm speaking to you today on my capacity as the President of TIAC, the Travel Industry Association of Kansas. As you know, we are a member association with tourism destinations and attractions around the state. Tourism is an economic driver for the state, historically adding $7.3 billion to the Kansas economy and sustaining more than 94,000 jobs in the state. We are submitting neutral testimony today simply because our members have not had adequate time to vet the amendments to this bill. But I do want to share with you some of the thoughts we've received from our members and some of the considerations as you consider creating a state's tourism grant program, a sports tourism grants program. First, a number of our members are in support of tourism sports grants. We have a number of communities across the state that have invested in sports facilities. And it used to be if you have a great sports facility, you could attract tournaments and events. But the landscape has gotten much more competitive in the last several years as communities and states have recognized the economic value of these sports events and tournaments. It now costs more to bring them to your community in terms of bid fees and that you're paying to the rights holders. And so that's one of the things that would help our local communities to attract more of these events to their facilities. Some of the considerations that our communities would like you to think about as you consider this bill is to make sure that it benefits destinations across the state. We know there's some language to provide some funding outside of the largest counties, but we want to make sure that the criteria and the considerations that are in place by whoever's making the decision on granting these funds considers smaller communities, and the fact that when you deal with smaller tournaments, it's sometimes harder to get that data. For example, when you talk about hotel room nights, some tournaments don't have hotel blocks, and so the attendees are making hotel reservations on their own. So it's a little harder to track the actual impact of those hotel rooms in a community. The second thing that we'd like you to consider are, as I said, is those requirements and criteria. I know there's using the economic impact calculator is the formula that's proposed here, and we just want to make sure that that's available and accessible to all destinations across the state, if that is the metric that's being used to measure the impact. The funding source is also something that's been discussed among our communities. I know that that has changed in the amendment. We just want to make sure that tourism is supported and fully funded in the state. That is the biggest priority of TIAC, and that benefits all of our destinations across the state to maximize that benefit. And so we just want to make sure that this fund would not in any way impact other funds that are dedicated to tourism. And also if there's any administrative costs to consider how those might be funded, and again, not impacting our core tourism funding. With that, those are really some of the big issues that our communities have pointed out, and we look forward to working with the proponents. We do think that Kansas is at a competitive disadvantage with what other states are providing, and we would love to see an opportunity for all Kansas communities that have sports tourism programs to grow the impact of that on the state and our economy. Thank you.
All right, so does Kansas currently spend any tourism dollars for sports tourism?
TIAC specifically, or our communities?
TIACs.
Yeah, so TIAC, so we're a member association, so we have some affiliate associations. There's a sports tourism coalition there's a number of members throughout the state who have sports facilities that are a member of My Destination, and many of the folks that have talked today are part of that organization. So at TIAC, we support that, but we do not, as TIAC, we don't provide any funding to support sports events in Kansas.
Okay, committee, any questions? Representative Sutton, you woke up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Good morning. I was looking a little bit for the clarification. You mentioned that smaller communities could also benefit from this, and that's fantastic. But then you seemed to say that we can't really track the success in those communities. Is that really what you're looking for, is not tracking the effect in smaller communities?
No, I think we strongly believe that there should be a measurable ROI to this. I think what we would just make sure is that the criteria are not, that there's multiple criteria, so that you're not just counting on one metric, but you're able to look across multiple metrics that show visitation into a community to measure that impact.
All right. What do you have in mind?
Well, so you can look at a number of different things. I know Starbond uses data to show how many people came to a location, right? Hotel room impacts are great. Sales tax collections in a destination. So there are a number of different impacts, and we just want to make sure that there's a broad look at that and not counting on one singular impact.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Corbett?
I got a question for you. Does your budget come out of the tourism budget when Bridget puts her budget together for her?
No, so TIAC as an organization is an association. We are not part of the state government. We get no funding from the Division of Tourism. We work to promote and advocate for tourism in Kansas. The one thing we do co-host the Kansas Tourism Conference with the state of Kansas. But other than that, it's completely separate budget and completely separate funding from state funds.
So with the funding you have, where does it come from? Just members?
We are a dues-based organization from our members.
Thank you.
Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little insulted. You don't think places like Hayes can do those kind of calculations? Do you think some town like Park, Kansas doesn't even notice what happens if people are in their community? I'm not sure that that's the best way to discuss the members of TIAC and particularly for my district, Hayes and Victoria, when they are watching everything. So I'm a little insulted by that.
Well, yeah, and sorry, I absolutely would love to clarify that. It's not that we don't think they can. We've actually heard from some of those communities that want to make sure that there's the ability to look broadly. For example, Garden City, was on a call we had yesterday explaining the bill, and the calculator that they use to calculate the impact of tourism events in their community is different than the Destinations International Economic Impact Calculator that's cited in the bill. So they wanted to make sure that wouldn't put them as a disadvantage.
So I would think that if they're going to qualify for one of these grants, so that they would be willing to, well, we should be able to tell them how to track their ROI. Any further questions? Okay, so you're neutral. You want to be a proponent. What do we need to do to get you to a proponent?
Well, again, I think part of the reason we're neutral is we simply didn't have the time to vet this through our processes to get our members to agree that we are going to be a proponent for this bill. So we would simply need more time and more time to digest and understand the specific language and criteria in the bill.
Have you been provided a copy of what the suggested changes are?
Yes, we have.
Okay. How long do you need to read it?
Yeah, we have looked at it, sir. Yes.
Okay, if you could get back to us as soon as you can, and then just know that we'll make a lower level too for rural areas.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none. Is there anyone else here neutral wishes to testify? All right, seeing none. Is there anyone, an opponent here that wishes to testify? I'm not seeing any written. All right, we will close. Oh, wait, I have one last question. I'm sorry. Jeremy, could you come back up here? We've talked about this concern in appropriations many times with the World Cup coming, and this is going to cause severe problems for you in 2026. Can you kind of elaborate how much time is between your event and the World Cup, and knowing that the World Cup doesn't really control, or KC26 doesn't really control the hotel? They're not like you where they contract with them all. They just tell the hotels what to expect. What is it? What's the main problem, and what can we do here to help?
Yeah, appreciate it, Chairman. So currently, the 2026 Top Gun Invitational will run from June 10th through June 14th of 2026. The first match for World Cup in Kansas City will be on June 16th. There's obviously been a lot of good publicity as far as how big of an economic driver the FIFA World Cup is going to be metro-wide. A lot of our hotel owners and specifically even some cities have blacked out hotels where they're not allowed to give any room blocks to anybody but FIFA or anything associated with the World Cup. We've worked tirelessly the last, we've flew in our housing component. We had a meeting with over 110 hoteliers present in the city of Olathe in November. I have personally went door to door to over 35 hotels in the last month. At peak, we need 3,000 room nights to host this event. Currently, we sit at 2,000 pledged. Nothing's under contract. And the reason it's not under contract is most hotels will not book anything in their system until 12 months prior to the event. So right now, we're hopefully have 2,000 pledged, but we have been sitting at 2,000 pledged now since January 1st. So we're going on over 2 months. There's been no movement. And at this point, my options are growing very limited.
What day is your tournament, and is there any flexibility in moving it forward?
Unfortunately, the way that I call it the tour, there's 6 major fast pitch events across the country. We host one of those, and it's consecutively over 6 straight weeks that Division I college coaches go from city to city to recruit these athletes. And so unfortunately, that is a locked date that is unmovable due to the calendar.
What was the date?
June 10th through the 14th, 2026.
The World Cup starts on the 10th?
So the World Cup's first game is going to be on June 16th. We are done before the first game starts, but obviously, if we host a country, they're anticipating a large crowd in front, and that's what the hoteliers are banking on. And we've tried to educate the best we can that, this is year after year business, and there's not a guarantee with the World Cup at the same time.
Okay. All right. Committee, any questions or suggestions around that? Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question for you, Jeremy. How many times do you think your organization would apply for a grant funding during the course of a year?
In the state of Kansas, this one's probably no more than 2 to 3, based on how it's written. We run several events, but the bigger ones would be the ones that we would apply for and be applicable for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks for coming back up. Appreciate it. Forgot about that earlier. All right, committee, I'm not seeing any other conferees, and so we will close the hearing on HB 2346. And we have no further business today. What do we have on the agenda tomorrow? Anybody know?
Good question.
Stand by.
Del, you have the
All right, so we had planned to do the child care bill tomorrow, and that was moved into calendar and printing for now, and hopefully we'll get that back. So meeting's on call with the chair, listen at the well tomorrow. If we do have the meeting, it will be to work that bill. We are adjourned.